Welcome to Coaching KidLit, a podcast about writing and publishing good KidLit.
We dig into various aspects of writing craft through a KidLit lens and provide inspiration and clear, actionable items to help writers like you move forward on their KidLit writing journeys.
I'm Sharon Skinner, author accelerator, certified book coach, and author of speculative fiction and KidLit, including picture books, middle grade, and young adult.
And I'm Christy Yaros, author accelerator, certified book coach, and story editor, focusing on KidLit, including middle grade and young adult.
Hello, listeners. It's me, Sharon. Christy's not with us again this month, but I do have a fabulous guest, and I'm excited to introduce her to you. Janet Fox is with us today, and Janet is an award-winning author with a deep passion for the magic of storytelling. Her writing journey began at age 8 with a poem published in the town newspaper, setting the stage for a career dedicated to writing captivating tales for young readers. As a writer, Janet strives to create books that can help grow young hearts and minds. Her award-winning books span the spectrum of picture books through young adult in a broad variety of genre. As a mentor and book coach with 25 years in publishing, her mission is to guide writers through the twists and turns of their creative odyssey, turning struggles into triumphs. Janet has helped scores of writers to achieve their dream of writing, revising, and yes, publishing their children's books. Janet is also a certified author accelerator book coach, as am I, and I'm excited to have her here with us. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm excited too. It's great to be here.
So your bio really starts us off, but do you want to elaborate a bit about your writing journey?
Sure. I started almost 25 years ago now, and really I started with SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and a mentorship provided by Kathy Appelt, who was a neighbor of mine in the town I was living in at the time. And so I feel like I got a very good grounding in the whole art and craft of writing for young readers from the get-go. SCBWI is a really fabulous organization. For those of you who are just starting out, it was certainly my introduction to what it meant to tell stories for young readers. And I tried my hand at picture books way back when, as we all do in writing for young readers, with terrible results, until I realized that maybe my voice was more suited to middle grade. And that's been my passion for quite a few years. Now I've gone back and I am crafting picture books. I've written young adult novels, and it's just a matter of learning how to tackle each audience, each age range, each interest level, and then understanding the basic craft of writing for children. But I would say that my sweet spot for the past maybe 10 years has been in middle grade. I really love it. Although I'm veering back into other things now with some adult fiction just for fun. So I love talking about middle grade books.
As an SCBWI member and the regional advisor for Arizona, of course, I am a big fan of SCBWI. I found SCBWI decades ago during my journey into writing for kids. Interestingly enough, my first kids book was actually middle grade and not a picture book. I wasn't attempting to write picture book. I was telling a story that I knew was middle grade. I knew it was targeted at those readers, but I realized I didn't really know how to do it well. And that is part of what brought me to SCBWI at that time. And of course, since then I have branched out. Much like you, I write across categories. I write picture book all the way up to adult. And you've published mainly in the KidLit arena so far.
Yeah, so far I have one adult novel actually with my agent right now, and another one that I'm contemplating just for fun, just because I love the craft. I love writing. I'll write whatever. And I think that's something that listeners could take away is don't limit yourself to one thing. If you're struggling in a certain audience age range or genre, try something else. Just liberate your mind to learning the craft. And really the craft is the foundation stone. And once you've tackled craft at a deep level, you can really apply it across the board to whatever audience or whatever genre you're writing in. So write from your heart. That's really a big thing of mine, is to tell my clients to write what they want to write deeply and feel passionately about.
That's great advice. I tell my clients to write not what they know, but what they feel. which is very similar when we're talking about how to get the story out of your heart and your head and onto the page.
Yeah, exactly.
What I love hearing about your journey, and not just that it's similar to mine and I feel validated, but also because I was told early on, pick something, pick a category and stick to it.
Mm, yeah.
That's what you need to do. You need to build your career on that. And I've never been that kind of a writer. I need to tell the stories that are in my heart, just like you're saying. And I had lots of stories in my heart, and they weren't all middle grade and they weren't all one thing or the other. So I love that you've been able to develop your writing career around a variety of categories and genre.
Yeah, really, I think it's the passion that comes with the story that is truly key. And as one example of that, I was writing middle grade fantasy, and I love this series, the Rookskill Castle series, for that fantasy element. It's historical fantasy, so there was some history and research that I love doing as well. But in the back of my head, I was playing with an idea for almost 10 years about a family living in a car, a homeless family, and what it would feel like to be 12 years old and living in a car. But I didn't know how to tell that story. And it just sat there stewing and stewing for a long time when I didn't even put a word on paper. Not a word. I didn't know the names of my characters. I didn't know who they would really be, except this one girl. And literally one morning I woke up and the whole idea kind of coalesced in my brain. It's a little spooky, but I felt like I was channeling something. And I wrote that book faster than I've ever written anything else. Came out in 1 month, went to my agent, went to my editor, and almost had no editing on it. It was so fixed. It was so solid right from the get-go. It's a very short novel. And that's Carry Me Home. And I think that's really something that writers need to understand. Again, if you write from your heart, from the passion of some idea, when you're ready to write that book, it's so much easier, if you will, to put it on paper than it is to struggle through something that you think might be great. It's going to sell. It's going to be a bestseller. Well, maybe, maybe not. That's never predictable. What is predictable is that you will love the outcome and you'll love the process as well, which is really important. Writing from that passionate place is really key.
I agree with you. I think that's so important. And I know different people come to this from different directions, but I also believe that the more passionate you are about a project, the more readily it comes to fruition. That said, one thing I want to key in on is what you said about it took
Yeah.
10 years of thinking about it. So another thing that I tell writers all the time is that about 80% or more of the writing process takes place in our brains and in our subconscious. So if we have a story that's churning inside of us, technically we're always writing. That's not to say you don't have to get it down on the page. I don't want anybody to think, oh, well, that I'm thinking about my story, I'm writing. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the process for different books is also different, because every book that I've written, my process has been slightly different. You hear me say it all the time, process is personal. And my personal process has morphed with each project, depending on what it is and how I'm trying to come at it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And oh, by the way, the whole time I was thinking about this idea, I was writing other things and learning the craft of creating a good, solid story at the same time, which is key. I mean, you have to understand the craft. So I'm also very passionate about following craft and learning over and over again, learning new things, going to different conferences or workshops or webinars or seminars or whatever it takes to really understand at a deep level the craft of writing. You think writing for young readers is a simple thing because they're young, they're kids. Picture books in particular seem to be very simple. No, it's a cumulative process of understanding how a story is constructed, and there is an art and a craft to it, both. And I think it's important for writers to know that they have to put those hours in to understand how to create the structure around the character of the story that they're trying to tell. You know, a lot of people are impatient to get this story out, but understanding the craft is the only way to really make that story rise to the level of publishable, much less readable.
You just said it again. You weren't ready to write that story yet. You didn't
Mm-mm.
really know how you were going to tell that story yet.
Right.
And in the meantime, you were being published. You had other books coming out. You were writing, you were publishing, but you weren't ready to tell that story yet because you didn't quite have whatever that little thing was that was going to
Right.
really springboard that story into life. I'm also a lifelong learner and a person who wants to really
Mm.
integrate craft at a deep level. That's one of the reasons I teach, because I find that when I teach, the
Hmm.
more I teach, the more I understand things at a deep level. The more I have to articulate it in multiple ways for different writers, the more I really understand it at an ingrained level. And that helps my writing.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. Every time I do a Substack posts on craft, I go, maybe I'd better look back at that scene I was just writing and see if I did the X thing that I'm talking about
I'm so
here.
happy to hear you say that, because I'll be teaching a workshop and be talking about something and I'll suddenly go, that's why that scene's not working in my book.
Yep. Yep. Being a lifelong learner is really important.
We also need to hear things over and over in different ways or
Yeah.
articulate them in different ways in order to really absorb them and get them at a deep level. Staying in it to win it is all about listening to podcasts like this and going to workshops and reading Substack posts or blog posts or what have you about craft and just staying in the game. I tell my writers, I get it. There's so much information out there and it's not all the same and it doesn't all come at you from the same direction and it doesn't all agree. I have over 200 craft books, just
Yeah.
writing craft books that I
Me
dip
too.
in and out of constantly. And I tell
Yeah.
my writers, I do that so you don't have to. But I can also make recommendations to them, which is, I think, really valuable on
Yeah.
which books might be helpful for them specifically, because that's the challenge, right? Trying to figure out which way we'll absorb it best, which articulation resonates,
Yeah.
which connects with our brains, because brains are fun, but they're also very different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point.
We've touched on that you've written picture books, you've written nonfiction. Winter Garden is a lovely picture book that's nonfiction. You have also a nonfiction book about organizing, but right now I'm seeing more coming from you that is mystery and contemporary mystery and more in the
Mhm.
middle grade arena. Let's focus a little bit on that.
Sure. I love the middle grade mindset. I think I'm arrested in middle grade. That's a pivotal age, that 12, 13 years old. You're just on the cusp of moving into emerging adulthood. And so all sorts of things are changing in your brain and your body and in your social connections. I love that age group because when I taught that age group back in the day when I taught eighth grade, I called them my changelings because they would one minute they were hugging me like I was mom, and the next minute they're like, so cool. So I do love that whole mixture of emotions that comes with middle grade, especially contemporary middle grade. Carry Me Home and then my newest one, Mystery of Mystic Mountain, are both contemporary middle grade. Carry Me Home is solid traditional contemporary. Mystery has fantastical elements to it. It's a suggestion of ghosts and a past history and so on, mainly because I love playing with that stuff and I think kids love it too. But I think for that age group, it's reaching into those emotional touch points for them. What's important to them? And friendships are primary importance. So those friendship relationships, and then the relationships that they have with family members, because they're both in conjunction at that moment in time. Prior to that, I think kids are mostly focused on family. And after that, when they're in the young adult space, they're really focused on those friendship groups. So this is the one place in childhood where readers are bridging both worlds, their family and friendship groups, and the emotional connections and ties and conflicts that come up as a result of that. So I really love playing with that. And I really loved it in Mystery of Mystic Mountain because I set it here in Montana where I live. And I set it in an aging dude ranch, which I know a lot about. And so it was super fun playing with the history of this area that I live in and all the elements of things that I know really well. And I just had fun writing this book. I wrote it at the tail end of COVID, and it was like, I just want to have fun. So that's what came out of that. But I will say middle grade is in a funny space right now. Middle grade is struggling in terms of readership. Think that may have something to do with book banning. Libraries in schools and public libraries are a little bit on edge about what they're able to put on shelves for kids. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe kids aren't sure what they should read or can read. I see that middle grade is having a moment where it's not growing the way it had been over the last couple of years, but these things change. And so if you're writing middle grade, by the time you're your book is done and in the hands of an editor and published, it'll be booming again for sure. I mean, this is the cycle we go through.
I'm glad you said that because, yes, we see these cycles all the time. For a while, it was YA was like the undiscovered country and everybody had just discovered it, right? And then
Right.
middle grade blew up quite a bit. And we see that expansion and shrinkage in categories, but also in genre. We see that happen in
Right.
genre. Although, as you know, we will hear, well, we don't want any more vampire books, but every year a new vampire book will come out, right? Because as Jenny Simner, one of my author friends says, there's always room for awesome. So again,
Right.
writing that passion project, writing from the heart, writing what is meaningful to you is, in my opinion, the best way to go.
Absolutely. Don't try to chase the trends because the trends are going to be gone in 5 minutes after you've started your book. So I think that's exactly right. And for me, this was a passion project just that rose out of needing something to entertain myself. The fun of how can I construct this mystery? How do I create these riddles and clues? Which was difficult, by the
Yeah,
way.
mystery is
It
not
was
something
tricky.
that I aspire even to write. I
It,
know that it's complicated and there are a lot of challenges with having all
right.
those clues. So you have to know the mystery, the resolution to it, and then plant all these seeds. That's an interesting process. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in this case, I knew from the very beginning where I wanted to end up. There's a backstory in the story, an outlaw that's long dead, who is a Robin Hood type of outlaw. So supposedly his accumulated wealth is still out there. It's a treasure to be found. And these kids come together to try and find the treasure for various personal reasons. Well, the treasure is not what they think it is. I don't want to give anything big away, but just to say that the treasure is a much different thing than they think it is. But they're chasing these clues that were planted partly by this outlaw when he was going through his latter days of maybe drifting into some sort of delirium, and partly by things that are contemporary because the antagonist is a contemporary treasure hunter who has bad intentions. So it was really fun being able to play with all of these clues. And I tell you, it was hard. I had to lay everything out and have arrows and diagrams. And this comes in here. Wait, oh, it has to actually be here because they need to know that by the time they get to this point. And it was a work in progress for sure. And I had a great copy editor who pushed me with some questions, and I had to be able to answer the timeline questions because there were these dual timelines in the story as well. And so I had to be able to answer those. And I, at one point, made a huge genealogical chart because there were so many relationships among these characters through time as well. So she said, can so-and-so really be so-and-so's grandmother? And I said, yes, and here's how it worked. So it was fun, but it was a challenge to write this book, but it was awfully fun. Yeah. And so writing this kind of book, this is more similar to The Charmed Children of Rookskill Castle, which was also very complicated. And especially the sequel, The Artifact Hunters, which involved time travel, which is another whole challenge. And by contrast, Carry Me Home was a very linear book in many ways. It's actually jumps through time as well with some backstory element, but it was much more straightforward to write in that I didn't have to plant all these clues that people had to then figure out in the book that I needed to know, but they needed to figure out. So yeah, it was a challenge, and I would not have been up to this challenge if it had been my first book.
Yeah, again, when
Yeah,
you're ready to write that story, it
yeah,
matters.
it does matter.
I assume, because we're both readers as well as writers, that you read a fair amount of KidLit.
I do.
Do you also read a lot of mystery? Is that kind of what pushed you to do this? Or did you just find this idea so compelling that you needed to write it?
The latter. But I think that every great story has a mystery at its heart, that there is something missing, whether that's something that's missing in the character's life, or whether it's an actual thing that's missing, or a person that's missing. I think at the heart of every story is a mystery. So I have always embraced mysteries. When I was a kid, my favorite thing to read were these minute mysteries. Someone recently posted about it. I thought I was the only person on the planet who knew about them. But I had these books that were called Minute Mysteries. And it was literally a page of a mystery setup. and you were thinking about it, and then you flip the page and there's the answer. It's kind of like a riddle, but in mystery form. So this little mini story, and you're thinking, how could that happen? How could that be? And you flip the page and the answer to the riddle or this little mini story is on the next page. That was one of my favorite things to read as a kid. And The Twilight Zone and One Step Beyond were my favorite TV shows. So I think those, and also Agatha Christie, followed right on the heels of Nancy Drew for me as a kid. Because when we were growing up, there was no middle grade genre.
Right.
So that kind of planted those seeds in me that mysteries are just inherently there in everything. And they are certainly in everything that I write. There's some kind of mystery, as it were.
That's a great way to think about it, because you said that there's always something missing in the character's life. And we look at that and we think about, what does the character need that they don't know that they
Right.
need? There's a difference between what they want and what they need. And usually that need is a mystery to the character, at least at the beginning of the book. We need to know as authors.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally hear what you're saying. That makes such perfect sense. I love hearing it described
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
mystery of the book.
As you just said, every character walks into this story. This is another thing that I think new writers need to learn and understand, is that the story that they begin on page one actually has a long tail behind it that leads up to page one. And that's all the stuff that the character has lived through, including wounding experiences and that desire that they have that they don't know that they have, but also the desire that they do know. The one thing that's missing in their life that's personal, above and beyond the story goal, the big tangible goal. There's always that big tangible defeat the bad guy goal. But underneath that, the character is going through something that they need that kind of parallels that goal, and they learn how to deal with that inner need by going through what they're going through in the story arc of the goal arc, if you will. And that's what I had to learn as a writer, to learn how to find all of those pieces, to put them together to create a three-dimensional character with a big problem internally and externally.
I love that you said arrested in middle grade, because I often tell people that the reason that I can write for kids is because I never grew up.
Yeah.
So there you
Yeah.
go.
We were always at the lunch table that wasn't the cool kid lunch table, right? It's funny when I've gone back to see the people I thought were the cool kids at like reunions or whatever, they say, oh, no, I was not the cool kid. I think we all carry the weight of those middle grade years.
Well, we were all awkward because we were just
Right.
trying to figure out who we are and where we fit and how to navigate. And like you said, there's that wonderful bridging between family and friends, and that separation that we're trying to figure out, how far
Right.
do we separate? And we're trying to make sense of all of that. It's a lot.
It is. Yeah. It's a fun age to
Yeah.
write for, though, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. I love my middle grade books. I keep coming back to them. My first middle grade book, I spilled out in 8 weeks. It was horrible. Because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
But I loved the characters,
Right.
and I loved the setting and the idea of the story. And it took years to figure out how to fix it so that it was publishable.
Sure.
And it is published, so it is in the world. But figuring that out, like you said, it took me a long time to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And honestly, the characters haven't changed. The setting hasn't changed. The external journey hasn't changed. But all of that internal stuff and
Yeah.
the structure of the story and basically the agency of the characters,
Yes.
that was all stuff I didn't really understand.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about giving middle grade characters agency in contemporary stories.
That's a great question. I love that question because agency means doing the stuff that needs to be done and not standing back and letting somebody else do it. So in the middle grade space, it means the parents don't get to do things for the kid. The kid has to actually go out and be on their own. So one of the tricks in middle grade is making sure that the child that is the center of the story, the protagonist, has space from adult supervision. And you can handle it in a number of different ways. Parents can be there, but they're off in their own space, off in their own worlds, or they're distant, or they're missing entirely. however you want to handle it, it's very important to give the character the space to do things, to make those things happen. And then the second part of that is to give the character choices, because they're tiny little choices that we all face every day, that the character's going to face in the moment. And then there are those big choices that we come to this fork in the road where you can really veer off into a bad space or a good space or something very much in between. But those choices are really key to giving the kid agency. And so those quick and dirty choices are the ones that I love to play with. In The Mystery of Mystic Mountain, I was thinking about this just today as I was writing a little blog post, that my main character has a sidekick. She chooses to join him in the search for the treasure. That's her big choice. But then at one point, she chooses to take one of these clues and stuff it in her pack and not tell him. And it was a momentary little choice that was made by, oh, I just don't want to do this right now, kind of thing. One of those little things that we do every single day. Oh, I can't deal with that right now. And so she takes this clue. Well, of course, when he discovers that she's taken it, he's furious. And so it creates a great moment of tension and conflict in the story between these two characters. And it makes her sit back and think about her journey. Her internal journey has all been about what kind of person she wants to be. Does she want to be a mean girl who disses on her old friends? Or does she want to be a true blue companion and a friend in a true way? And it's the moment where she says, oh, dang it, I chose wrong. And so I think that that's how you can give those middle grade characters agency. First, by letting them loose without parental supervision in a constraining way. And secondly, by giving them both big and small choices that they can make all the way through your story that will make them think about, wait, this choice that I just made is really bad, or yes, I nailed it this time. That's how I look at it. And when I'm in the middle of the scene, for example, say, what can I do to make this character make a choice and then think about that choice?
One of the things that I find when I'm trying to write middle grade contemporary is that technology can get in the way of that because you're always in touch. So I have to find ways to take technology out of the hands of the kids, or I have to find internal ways for them to choose not to. So, for example, if the reader's reading along, they might think, why doesn't the character call their mom and ask for help, or go home and talk to their parents about this? Well, we know as middle graders don't do that.
No.
A lot of times we don't opt to ask an adult for help because we want to find our own way.
Right.
But you need to show that on the page. We need to show the reader to answer that question so that the reader, when they get that question in their brain, doesn't sit there and go, well, why didn't they? Why didn't they? I always feel like it's important to, in some way, show that choice on the page so that the reader doesn't have that question bothering them as they move forward.
That's a great point. In fact, I tackled that issue in both Carry Me Home and in The Mystery of Mystic Mountain. So in Carry Me Home, because they're homeless and things happen pretty drastically right from page 1, my character just doesn't have access to a phone, period. In The Mystery of Mystic Mountain, she does have a phone. She texts a lot in the story, actually. But when she texts her dad, it's very superficial and he's got to go, honey, kind of thing, because he's not present. Mom is present, but she's in her own little world. But she's texting her friends. And that's the way that I show this push-pull of the kind of friend she is and the kind of friend she wants to be. And that was one way I did that purposely. Plus, the antagonist is not just an antagonist searching for a treasure, he's a social media star. And I wanted to play with that aspect of how detrimental, how enticing, how fraught that whole world can be. So he's doing these things because he likes his stardom, he likes his fame, he wants more. And that subtly, I hope, that's my goal, provides an example to these kids that this is just not cool. He's a jerk.
So you embraced technology for that, but you used it in a way that still furthered the story.
Yes.
I think that's great.
Thanks. Yeah, I had fun playing with that aspect of it too.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would definitely like to cover? I know we're kind of coming up on time
Hmm.
here, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on anything else that you would like to share.
Not really. Again, writing the book of your heart, whatever that is, if you find a concept that says, oh, that really sounds like a cool concept to play with, I really encourage my writers to find a character first. I think everything is about the character's emotional journey. I think plot is one of those things that a lot of writers think, oh, that's the most important thing. I got to get my plot beats or my act 1, 2, 3 or whatever. And yes, of course you do. But I'm actually writing a craft book now, which I'm excited about. And I'm taking it from that other side. I'm calling it the art and craft. And the art part is finding the characters. So once you have decided on your concept and have a general idea of the plot, I would really encourage listeners to focus on the main character and the antagonist and what their emotional journeys are all about, and not worry so much about this happens and then this happens, but what is the emotional journey that the main character must go through in order to achieve both their internal and external goals, and what is the antagonist going to do to try and stop them? And that's an emotional journey too.
I'm a very character-driven writer, so I don't know how to get a plot without having a character to understand what I need to put them through. So you're speaking my language there. Well, this has been great. I could talk to you all day. Clearly, we could just go on and on, but we do have to limit our time. But we do like to leave our listeners with an action item every episode. And I would like to offer you the opportunity to share your action item with our listeners now.
So when I talk about character, one of the very first things I do to create my character is to uncover what I call their backstory wound. And there's actually a process that makes it fairly easy to do that. I like to think about, okay, where have they been? Where have they come from? And then craft 5 short scenes or potential scenes for that character that happened long before page 1. Even in picture books, there is backstory. I'm thinking of the picture book Big by Vashti Harrison, which the backstory is that she's a big girl. That's enough for a picture book. For a middle grade novel, you need a little bit more. And I would fashion those 5 very short scenes and then pick the one that's the most emotionally dynamic, the one that has the most resonant emotion. We all have them. I mean, for me, one of my backstory wounding scenes might be that I was swept under by a wave when we were at the beach when I was 3 years old, and I still remember the moment, and I'm still terrified of water. So if I were to write a story in which water was a factor, I'm on a boat or whatever, that would be a big backstory wound for that character, and I'd play on it. So find the one that's the most emotionally resonant for the idea that you're coming up with, and then detail it and make sure you really capture the wounding part of it and bring it into that character desire at the beginning of the story that underlies all of the emotions that the character is carrying forward.
That's great. So my action item for our listeners this month, because it was my mother's 90th birthday recently,
Oh,
and she's in memory care. So she doesn't
mm,
really remember a lot of things. And it got
mm,
me to thinking, because my sister-in-law asked me for a bunch of pictures. She wanted to make a video for my mother.
mm,
And so she was asking me
nice.
for all these pictures when we were kids and all this stuff. And it got me to thinking about some people struggle with remembering what it was like back when they were in middle grade, unlike those of us who have that arrested component to our personalities. So my action item is for whatever range of age that you're writing for, go back and look at those family photos, those pictures that will remind you of your place and the space that you were in when you were that age, and spend some time sitting with those memories. Even your school pictures, like if you have a school
Hmm.
picture
Hmm.
or a yearbook, that you can sit and look at your classmates and remember who they were and the interactions that you had and who you were and what you felt like during those years. Because not everybody has kids at home. We aren't in spaces where we hear kids and see kids, and some of us remember that time better than we remember last year, but some of us don't.
What a great suggestion. I love it. It's so concrete. It's a great idea.
I just think that will get you in the
Yeah.
mindset when you're writing for that age group, that you can get into the mindset of
Yeah.
that by remembering who you were at that time.
No, that's terrific. Yeah. Love it.
Janet, it has been fabulous having you here today. You want to tell our listeners where else we can find you?
Yeah, I do have a website, of course, and that can lead you to my course platform. And I have free downloads as well as short paid courses, as well as bigger paid courses. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky. But my main platform, I would say, is my Substack platform, which is under my name. It's also under Foxtails, Tales, not the kind of tail on a fox. And that's where I blog now twice a week. The free blog is still craft tips and tricks. And behind the scenes now, I'm posting pieces of this upcoming craft book that I am writing. So I'm trying to reach all levels of audience.
You're keeping busy. And your website is janetsfox.com, all one word.
Correct.
And we'll put that in the show note. Thank you, listeners. And Janet, I can't thank you enough for being such a great guest.
Thanks. It's been fun. Super fun. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Coaching KidLit, a writing and book coaching podcast for writers who want to level up their KidLit writing game. For more about us and to discover what a book coach can do for you, check out coachingkidlit.com and follow us on social media.